All right, we're sitting here for a great episode that's getting ready to come up with somebody that at least I've followed for a period of time in his career, and especially Matt Leclair, somebody that he had served with, and that's the former Regimental Sergeant Major Mike Albaugh for 75th Ranger Regiment. We just wrapped up another great episode with him. It was a lot of fun, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a lot of personal tie-ins with him. We know a lot of the same people, but, you know, much with the trend of senior leaders coming from the regiment, super well-spoken, very humble, and can definitely tell you about leadership in a way that everybody can understand without having to, you know, put his shoulder out there and show his tab off all the time. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff that you're going to get out of this, whether you're an individual that's not a part of the regiment, you're from any branch of the service, never served, just looking at pure leadership opportunities. You're looking at going in and you're already a seasoned NCO and you're looking at maybe as an E6 or something, thinking about coming into the regiment. All kinds of excellent points that he calls out. And we hope you enjoy this episode. Be sure to hit the subscribe, hit the little bell so you get a reminder whenever this episode comes out or the next one comes out. You can fully support us on Patreon if you'd like to. Make sure you follow us on all the social media by the mentors, the number 4 MIL, and appreciate everybody who's already supporting and following us these days.
Smash that like button. So no shit, there we were.
So biggest thing, man, is I'm just glad you came all this way from Tampa and joined us in studio, and appreciate you coming from Tampa. That's a long drive, man.
Yeah, it's a little bit, about 6 hours up to Columbus. I stayed there last night and then drove up a little while ago, so not bad. Break it up a little bit.
How's the boys doing down there at Fort Benning? Now Fort Benning, not Fort Moore anymore.
They're good. They're good. I went over to the regiment this morning and got to see the RCO and RSM. Hadn't seen them in quite some time, so it was good to catch up with them, see a few people around there. So everybody's, it's busy. They're always busy. So.
That's true.
Always doing something. It was good that they were in town while I was in town, coming through town. So yeah, it was good to see him. I hadn't seen Colonel Matt in a couple of years, so it was good to catch up.
Did you get out there and do a little PT with him or anything?
I did not go out and do PT with him. No.
I don't blame you. I mean, last time you were out there on their footprint was 2018. You said around there?
20 when I left in 20. Yeah.
So they had all the hill and the fitness facilities and all the functional trainings. You guys using Beaver Fit out there?
Yeah. Did you guys have that team, the performance team and everything at that time frame?
We did down at the down at the gym there. We had a performance team down there. They've probably enhanced it since I've left.
Yeah.
I really kept track of it. But, I mean, they're constantly, the Ranger Regiment is constantly evolving their fitness and bringing different people in and expanding the footprint for more PT opportunities and obstacle courses and all those things. So it wouldn't surprise me.
Having retired in January and stuff, how's the transition been?
It's been good. Finishing on my career down in Tampa at SOCOM, it kind of was a soft landing kind of down there. That's where we wanted to retire. In that area, so it gives an opportunity to kind of off ramp out there in Tampa, get a lay of the land. Bought a house down there, had an opportunity to do all my medical stuff while I was down there. They got a great clinic, the 6th Air Wing over there in MacDill has a great clinic. SOCOM has a clinic, able to do everything there, if not out on the town. So I was able to kind of situate myself pretty good. And then, as I'm finishing on my bachelor's, or in the midst of finishing on my bachelor's, I came across the opportunity to get into the executive MBA program up at USF. I got introduced to that. So I didn't think I was going to want to go after a master's, but it was a great opportunity and kind of a transition out. So I'm just doing the school right now. I'm not really working, just taking a little bit of time off and concentrate on the education and trying to wrap my head around kind of like private industry business.
So good that you did that, actually, because I know when it took me like 8 years in order to get my bachelor's degree, trying to do it at night and the evenings and everything else. And this guy now knows, how much a pain it is to do the master's program and stuff too in evenings. And, I did what you're talking about. I came right out. As a matter of fact, I hadn't even graduated, but because I was attending the same university for the master's, the MBA program, I allowed them, I was like, I finished my grades and I know I haven't walked the podium or anything, walked the stage, but can I go ahead and start the summer session into the master's program? And they allowed me to do it. And it was a nice transition to keep going, because otherwise, you know, your study habits, you get a little bit lazy, you know, even a semester off.
Can I do something?
Yeah.
I'm going to do the same thing you did to me.
What?
Can we rewind?
Yeah.
A little bit? Where'd you grow up?
Grew up near Columbia, Maryland, so right in between Baltimore and D.C.
Yeah.
Grew up there, went to high school, got out of high school.
Where'd you go to high school?
Atholton High.
Okay. I went to Lake Braddock Secondary School.
Okay.
It was Burke. It was like Centerville, West Springfield, that whole area.
That area?
Yeah. West Springfield's been in movies before.
Okay.
I forget. Anyway. Yeah. So I grew up in the D.C. area a little bit.
Okay. So I grew up there and then got out and then just kind of bounced around different jobs, went to school for a little bit, community college, kind of really didn't find out what I really wanted to do. And I just kind of started thinking about the military. About 25, 26 years old, started thinking about going in the Army.
Yeah.
So it's, and I kind of went down that journey. About the time I was 26, kind of made that decision that I wanted to go in the Army and join, you know, get a Ranger contract. And so my family's not military. I don't come from a military family. My grandparents on my mom's side were in the Navy. So, but they short times in the Navy, and then they got out and worked government jobs. So really didn't have much touch with military. I didn't come from a military background. So finding information, I had a few people that could touch here and there and find out information about it, but it was kind of this is 95, 96. There's no internet. There's no YouTube videos of the Army and Rangers or anything like that. So I had to do a little research, and I just kind of knew what I knew, that like, hey, the Rangers were kind of like, you know, kind of a top tier of the Army, and they did special operations stuff, and I kind of wanted the challenge. So went down to the recruiter and asked what I need to do to get into the Rangers.
Were you an athlete in high school, or was
no,
it
not really? So yeah, just something I did. I did, you know, kind of. I was a motocross racer when I was younger. Did some judo, jiu-jitsu type stuff after I got out of high school for a while. So that was kind of my extent of my athleticism, I guess you could say. I really wasn't a sports person, but something drove me, kind of called me to like want to join and kind of test myself with the Rangers. So that's kind of what pulled me.
How did you even hear about the Rangers, though? I mean, because social media and everything wasn't even around at that time.
Yeah, I don't remember. There was little, you know, honestly, there was a couple of articles here and there about Rangers. Unfortunately, one of the things that I started looking into, there was the incident in Florida phase where the Rangers on that patrol had drowned, right? So then that was something that was in the news at that time. I think
it was like 95,
95, yeah. So I knew about that, and I just started doing a little research. I mean, I'm in the library at the community college, Montgomery Community College, looking through like old newspapers, like going through microfiche. That's how old we're talking.
Yeah. Well,
trying to find out information about the Rangers.
Please share what the microfiche is.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know what a microfiche is,
it's right there with like the 3.5 flop.
Yeah. So imagine sitting in front of a large television, old school projection television, with your hands on this microscope looking plate, and you slap down film, and then it just magnifies it in front of you, and you get to play Ouija board.
Or you got a little wheels on the front and side.
We're not that old, Rob. Okay. We actually got the Ouija board. We didn't do the cranks. It's like an old Gatling gun. So when you went to MEPS, if you went to MEPS, I mean, they still had,
they had the join system, which is the big laser disc, right? That you watch the films from.
Yeah. The big laser discs.
Yeah. But he got everything on the dot matrix printers.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, with your whole contract. It was like multiple layers, and they folded it together.
Yeah, they came out with it.
So you joined out of Maryland, and then you delayed entry?
I did delay entry.
Okay.
I joined, I guess in March, April timeframe, and then I ended up just staying out the rest of the summer, and then I went in September of 96.
That's when I went in.
Yeah, September of 96.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, so I did OSIT. That's why I remembered. I did OSIT in Fort Knox.
Oh, okay.
And then you did yours at Benning.
Yep.
Yeah, Sand Hill.
Yep.
So 16 weeks.
So, yeah, I think it was the 16th. It was the old 16th. I know we started and we ended right before Christmas, and then we went on Christmas Exodus.
Okay.
So we were able to. So when we came back, then I was on to Airborne School and then RIP.
Yeah, so that was one-stop shop.
It was a one-stop shop, and then I got assigned to 375, and I didn't leave Fort Benning for 10 years. So,
did you request 375, or is it one of those things where the eeny, meeny, miny, mo? What was it?
So there was a cohort of us who had kind of gone through basic airborne and RIP together, right? A bunch of us, John Sullivan and Mark Holden and Bob Wilson and Whittington. There was a bunch of them, and we all kind of wanted to go to 175. And about a third of us went to 175. So, yeah, I wanted to go to 175. It was a little closer to home, right? 9 hours instead of 12, and to get back up to my family. And I ended up going to 375, and I have no complaints about it. I had a great time at 375. I was in Charlie Company pretty much my entire career while I was there, in 1 platoon, and then I did a little time at 3 Charlie, but most of my career spent in like 2 Charlie and 375.
That's pretty awesome, though, to be able to do that. And I mean, I guess that's kind of the beauty as well of Ranger Regiment, is being able to kind of stay in Homestead for a period of time.
Yeah, it was good. And then I got the opportunity to go up to HRC in Alexandria for the Army and be the L&L up there. So that kind
of Hoffman buildings.
In the Hoffman buildings, that's right. So I was the last.
I remember those.
I was the last 2 years. It was a 2-year assignment. I was the last of the 2-year assignment guys. The guy who replaced me out of 175 Mac. He did 1 year there, and then he did the transition to Kentucky when HRC went to Kentucky.
So we skipped the stage here because you went to Ranger School. And so I want to get back to this part about what happened in Darby. What happened down in Swamp Phase for you, because you got recycled.
Yeah, I did. I actually got recycled in Mountains as well.
Oh,
yeah. So I spent some time in Ranger. My Ranger School journey was kind of an odyssey almost. I mean, I spent some time in Ranger School, and I spent a couple of times getting back and forth there too. I had an incident. I pulled out the first time for 5 Mile Run. So that's when they used to do the group runs, and we were all in the back, and it just was bad luck on my timing. And then the second time was a heat casualty. I went back that summer. It was a pretty bad heat casualty too, so it wouldn't let me come back. So then I went back a third time. I'm like, I'm just not leaving.
That was Dahlonega?
Yeah. So then I went to Dahlonega as heat casualty in Darby, but then I came back, went up there, recycle Mountains, came back, did the then we did the break, right? And then I finished up Mountains and then got to Florida, and then again, another recycle, bad patrol, weapons squad leader, guns didn't work. It's all my fault, right? I mean, they're 60s that we were, this was when we had the 60s, right? Worked on them all day long, maintenance, got out there and like one fired. And so I was a no-go for that.
60s were fun. So 60s guys, those are old machine guns.
Yeah, carried in Vietnam.
Yeah. And you didn't want to put a blank firing adapter on them because it was absolutely horrible.
No, they were. And I burned almost melted some barrels having fun with those things though.
The pig.
Yeah.
So you wanted to talk about, so kind of I basically said, hey, if you send me back, I'm just coming back.
Yeah.
This was kind of what I told the
that's kind of to me a funny story, because it just kind of showed there just how you weren't going to quit. And that's one of the biggest things that we've talked about on this podcast, about going to either, whether it's going to Ranger Regiment, going through RASP now, or going to Ranger School, is just try to keep that never quit attitude.
Yeah. So I think, so part of it, the never quit for me was like, personally, I just didn't want to quit. I wanted to achieve this, and I didn't want to let my people, my friends down, and my chain of command down, right? They sent me there with the belief that I could get my Ranger tab and be a future leader in the Ranger Regiment, right? So like, not achieving that, I was letting a lot of people down. So that's why it was like so personal to me to get that Ranger tab and get that point out of my career, past that career there. That's kind of what I would do. What
was it then at 5th RTB that the mountain phase that got you? Was it the heat casualty, or was
No, that was in Darby summer before. No, Mountains again. It was just
ropes?
Bad patrol.
Oh, okay.
No, I was okay with the ropes. I was okay with knots. But I passed all that stuff. Just another, just a bad luck on a patrol. And at the end of the patrol, it just kind of didn't turn out very well for me.
I mean, it's a great story. I mean, we're going to get to where you ended up. A lot of people probably know you just by your name of being the Regimental Sergeant Major. So you weren't a one and done and breeze all the way through. No. You were a recycle. So we hear all these guys that complain about, recycles. Not everybody gets that opportunity. In a lot of cases, if you continue to show that you're willing to be there, you're going to get the opportunity. In your case, you just kind of told the brigade commander, I'm not leaving.
Yeah, I said
ARTB.
Yeah. I said, hey, I don't want to go. Like, put me back down in Florida, and I will get my Ranger tab. I do not want to go. I think I can do this, And he said, okay. And he actually, They had recommended the TAC when I came in that night from Florida. I came in with about 6 or 7 of us that were recycles and drops. And the TAC, the only one he was going to recommend for recycle was me. And actually the brigade commander sent all of us back to Florida.
Nice.
It was nice. Yeah. It was all my buddies that I had been through. And, you know, a couple of us we've been together for a long time. So we all kind of got to go back and finish up Florida.
Do you think that your maturity, the age had a role to play? Do you think they listened to you a little bit more? Because there's a difference between, I think, a private that's, you know, 18 years old and like, I got this, as opposed to a 27-year-old that's been like, hey, I'm, you know, on my shield or with it. You think they listen to you?
I would presume maybe a little so. I don't want to speculate too much, but I mean, probably I was older than most of that. So some of the group that I got sent back with were from IOBC, just got done IOBC. We're going on to Ranger School, so they were young officers. A couple of the younger NCOs. So I was probably the older one of the group. They may have listened to me a little bit.
Yeah.
I just think I kind of came in with a compelling case, and I was like pretty steadfast. Like, I don't want to leave. Like, if you send me back, you're just going to see me back here again. I'm going to be right back. So,
yeah. When you went to HRC, I want to talk a little bit about that and dive deeper now that we got through the Ranger phase of this thing, and we're now getting up into later within your career. Because I think by HRC, you were already E7 at that time frame?
I was in E7. I finished my platoon sergeant time at 375. And then I took that opportunity to go up there. I had aspirations of being a Ranger First Sergeant, and pretty much everybody who had taken that job, that was, you know, that was going to get you back, right? That was kind of like one of those, you know, jobs that's going to kind of set you up to be a Ranger First Sergeant somewhere in the Ranger Regiment. So I knew that job would do that. So yeah, I took that job and went up there the summer of 07.
Yeah. So I think one of the better things, and I'm wanting to get your opinion on this, I think, is about understanding the personnel, the back end, the MTO, you know, the personnel management, the assignment, working, you know, with HRC and understanding that back end gives you a real good foundation for your future assignments and leading troops. And I'm very curious how your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, it did. I learned a lot. So I had known a lot of the guys who had done that job before me, right? I got a lot of, from Shane Gore, who I replaced, gave me a lot of information. Rob Nichols, who was the first sergeant HAC at 375, had done the job. We were good friends. He had given me a lot of insight. Chuck Albertson was up there. So I got a lot of good insight on what I was getting myself into. But really to go up there and like learn about how the Army mans the Army, right? How it puts people there, and they do in each branch. There's a branch for every MOS, and then there's certain people in the branch that manage the certain rank structures, right? And then how they look to career manage them. So whenever we had people, so at the time that I went up there, we had just expanded recently to like 62, 63 MOSs. We had brought on all the support MOSs, right? And there were all these, so you had to learn kind of when I went up there, I knew like 11 Bravo, 11 Charlie, 13 Fox, right? And I remember getting up there and Shane Gore gave me a card with all the MOSs. He's like, these are all the MOSs. And there were like 62 of them on there, and you kind of had to know what they all were. And then you had to go around and make relationships with all the branches, and then all the branch managers and all the people that manage. So when you had a Ranger that was wanting to leave the Ranger Regiment and go on to the next thing, you had to talk to them about, hey, what is the best career choice for them? What's the next, here's what he's done or she's done, and then what is the next step for them in their career? And it taught me a lot about like how to help people manage their careers and get them in the best place.
Especially as a senior NCO. I mean, you know, once you get back to being a first sergeant, and we'll touch on that, and then especially, you know, sergeant major, command sergeant major, and being able to have that institutional knowledge and telling somebody this is the next logical step for you. And it's not because you're sergeant major, it's because you have that knowledge, you have the experience. And so, you know, I always listen to people that worked HRC, PersCom for the old school folks, because they know, and they also know the future. I mean, you guys were looking 10, 15 years out. You're looking at the next, you know, evolution of what I came in when Div Cav was a thing. And then all of a sudden they start separating Div Cav out. You know, assignments officers knew that back in the day. They knew about that well before it happened. So.
When you think about like the Rangers being unique, it's an assessment type of program that gets you in there. So when individuals do decide that if they Abrams charter, at some point you're going to have to leave and all of that, you need to have a friend in high place up there that's actually like you're doing, walking around and helping take care of me.
Yeah, and it was even a little bit more than that. So, you had, I helped get people Rangers who got out of the Army back into the Army. There was times where I would have to go up and help with some type of awards or NCOERs. I even had to go over a couple times and deal with the gentleman who dealt with bringing people in through the not green to gold, but transferring over into warrant. So some of our guys would go over to warrant, right? So it was just not only like assignments, there was a lot to that job that I didn't really realize. We eventually put 2 people up there. I had told Sergeant Major Hardy, I was like, hey, I'm not saying that I can't do it. I can obviously do it on my own, and so can anybody else. But I would tell you, to have 2 people up here to be able to tag team, it's just such, back when, other people had done it when the regiment only had maybe 12 or 15 MOSs, it was pretty not too bad. But now with 62 and all the things the regiment's doing, it becomes a little, the bandwidth starts to go away. And we had a civilian, Christine, had been up there for years, and she was like, she saw so many of us come through. Every 2 years, there's another guy got to train, right? And she's like, her institutional knowledge was, you couldn't put a price tag on it. And she did very well in teaching all of us ins and outs of assignments and how the Ranger Regiment worked manning wise and how HRC worked. So I think they eventually did put a second person up there, and they staggered them. So every year a new guy comes in, and then the senior guy leaves, and it's served them well.
That's smart. Was that part of the 62? Was that RMIB too, the Military Intelligence Battalion, or was that before even that?
That was before that.
Wow. So now you figure RMIB on top of it.
Yeah. Wow. So then they brought in more I think we had a lot of those Intel MOSs, and we just kind of collated them over to the RMIB, and then we've added a few more. But yeah, that was before RMIB. That was, I think, even before they had stood up the MICO company, actually, when I was there. They hadn't even stood up the MICO company. You just had your Intel people down at the battalions and over regimental headquarters.
Yeah, it's just steadily grown, It's just the regiment itself has just grown. So, self-sufficient.
I mean, it has to be at times, in order to make sure that those who are providing the supporting elements are doing things in a way in which they understand the Ranger way, and what's required of that mission set. And so that's why RMIB came about. But I think some people are even surprised that there's mechanics and there's cooks and there's, personnel people. I mean, you're fully staffed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, there are always, degradations in some of those support MOSs and people coming in, like, some of the ones you mentioned, the mechanics and across the cooks have always been hard ones to fill.
12 series engineers.
Yeah, engineers. But I would tell you, I think the best thing we ever did, though, is, we made everybody go through the same selection, right? So like General Carilla and Colonel Carilla at the time, I think it was Sergeant Major Merritt, had come up with like the RASP, and everybody's going to be the same, and we're all going to go through the same thing. And it's probably hampered the Ranger Regiment a little bit, because now some people may not want to go through that. I'm a 68 whiskey, or I'm a truck driver, or a cook, or whatever MOS I am, and I don't really want to go through a selection. I just go out to the regular Army and do something less challenging, right? Whereas so now you have to come through that pipeline with the Ranger Regiment and assessments, and it was the best thing because it put everybody's the same. Before that, it was like some people had red berets, and then there was the haves and have-nots, and it was just that put everybody on the playing field. It was probably the best thing the Ranger Regiment ever did. And I would tell you, the other tribes will be like, you guys did it right. Like you all don't have the problems that we have on like, you got this group and you got that direct assignment people, and it's different.
Some people have asked about, since we're on the fact of RASP and such, we get a lot of questions about RASP too. And as much as we've had Regiment on with us and we talked about RASP program overall, and they've tried to at least talk about it, I think what most people are probably interested in are you're already an E5, you're an E6 within the Army, you may already have a Ranger tab, you're airborne qualified and everything, and then you're wondering, all right, is this something I really want to go to? Is this something I want to commit to? And what is this RASP 2 all about? And so that uncertainty or thing of not knowing what it takes in order to do that maybe causes some people to not take the leap. And I mean, sure, in some MOSs, you're going to come in there and be a leader of Rangers who've been there since they were privates. But what I, at least from social media accounts and stuff, I try to tell guys is don't self-select, go through it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the fear of the unknown is just like with most selections, right? Whether it's, the long walk, whether it's SF, whatever it is, there's this fear of the unknown, right? I don't know what's going to happen. Do I really want to put myself out there? Freaks a lot of people out. So with the RASP too, yeah, you have that, if you're going to be, it's actually E6 and above officers, and then internal regiment NCOs going to the next level, platoon sergeant.
You had to do it.
I did have to do it. They had just instituted it in 2009. They put it into effect. I came back from Afghanistan. I was at 175 at the time, and it was an E8. And then I went to, I don't know, it was like the 5th or 6th iteration of it. And I had to go to, be verified to go be a first sergeant in the Ranger Regiment.
How was that?
It was challenging. I did well, obviously. So, I passed, but it's, again, like this is my organization I've been with 12 years at the time, something like that. I'm very familiar. I know everybody. I'm very comfortable, but there's a sense of uncomfortableness going over there and going through that, right? Because anything can happen, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm going to break my leg on a 5-mile run, or like, you just, all these kind of crazy thoughts come in your head. I'm like, you're very nervous, and there's an expectation, like, again, like my ranger, my battalion sergeant major, Nick Bielek, sent me over there to pass and come back and be a first sergeant, not to fail.
Yeah.
Right. So like,
yeah, that was just, in his mind, that was a check the block.
Right.
Event.
Just go over and do this thing and come back. I need you.
Yeah.
Right. So like, get this thing done and get back over here. So, yeah, and it was challenging. It's a great, and that program has really evolved. It is challenging for just about everybody, physically, mentally. They kind of run you through, and we brought in all kinds of psychs, and that thing it's pretty good. When I was the RSM, I used to go out. There's a portion of it that they do a long movement at night with some extra stuff to carry, and I would go out and do that with them many times when I was the RSM. Go out and just do that for the night with them. And it's challenging, but it was, again, it was this sense of accountability that we put in place, right? So like, there was no like, well, Mike Albaugh got to be a first sergeant because he knows so-and-so and so-and-so. Well, he actually had to go through this process to reassess himself to make sure he's kind of the standard that we want to be a leader in this organization for like a company of Rangers.
Yeah, and the Army has kind of instituted that now.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and as a command sergeant major, as a regimental command sergeant major, did you have to go through the executive, and I forget what it's called.
Yeah, it is executive something.
So the executive RASP. So I did have to do that to come back and be the first battalion sergeant major and then RSM. Yeah, I do all my critical events, see psych, everything. Yeah. They put you. I didn't have to go through 3 weeks of RASP, but I mean, if I guess if they had made it, then I would have. But at that point, I think, you're going to get ready to go be a battalion commander, battalion sergeant major, or RC or RSM. You're in some type of a job that like taking you out 3 weeks can't do it, right?
Yeah.
I was, that's you kind of got to look at it that way. Is, hey, we're going to verify he can do these events and he's physically fit and he's mentally fit to come back in. That's how it works.
Yeah.
I mean, that speaks a lot about the program too, though. Like, every day is a selection.
Oh yeah.
Every day you are in the beret, and you hear a lot of Rangers talk about that. There's nothing saying that on Monday you're going to come back and you're going to be okay, because you may go out and do something stupid over the weekend or whatever that you didn't even realize was that bad. There's a lot of guys that end up getting put out of the regiment because of a silly mistake. Now, they go on to have amazing careers post the Rangers, so it's not like that's the end-all be-all of your career. Some of them even went on to do the long walk and going to Delta and everything, but it's a selection every day.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, there's an expectation, and I think the pressure gets on you a little bit more as you rise in rank and responsibility, right? I think, becoming a first sergeant, I think that was the most pressure I had felt. And at that point in my career, is like, I'm, a Ranger first sergeant, right? I got this whole company of people that are looking for me to lead them. And, during a time of combat, like we were very busy 2010, 2012. I mean, it was kind of very busy, as you guys know.
Yeah, turn and burns
and, deployment, come home, training cycle, going a little leave, back into the grinder again. So those were some, some trying times, and then just kind of trying to keep yourself mentally and physically fit during that time. It was a lot.
Let's go back to like 03 time period, because during that time frame, since we just mentioned like Delta and the long walk, were you thinking about assessment at that time?
I did. Actually, I went to the long walk. Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did do the long walk. Yeah. So didn't work out for me.
Okay.
And not one of those ones, right? Like, I think at the time I was, very distraught about it, right? It's like I really wanted to go back. I went twice, went the first time, and I wasn't mentally prepared. I just wasn't there for it, to be quite honest with you. The second time, I was there, and I was doing very well. And then I had, my heat casualty thing called up to me on like the third day, and I kind of burnt myself really hard in. And then when I woke up Thursday morning on like one of the more difficult days, I was like really sick. And I kind of muscled my way through it and didn't make it that day. And then the second day I had a bad day, and that was it, right? So then I came back, and I remember Matt Walker was the CSM, had just taken over 375. And, he's like, he'd seen me in the chow hall. He says, "Hey, come see me." He hadn't even met me before. I'd never met him. And he says, "So what do you want to do?" And I was like, and I'm here. What do you want me to do? I didn't get selected. He goes, "Well, they're lost my game. So, I'll put you to work." And then that was it. And so I really appreciate what he did. Him and Nick Bielik both kind of gave me an opportunity, right, where they could have said, "Well, you didn't really want to be a platoon sergeant. You want to do the long walk and go there. Maybe, find something else to do." And they didn't do that. So I kind of embraced that as I kind of went along in my career as a first sergeant and a sergeant major. Is that, hey, I had no ill will against the place. It was a great opportunity to go. I learned a lot about myself. And when I was in those positions of first sergeant or sergeant major, if guys wanted to go and do the long walk, I totally supported it, right? Hey, you want to go do that? Hey, take a little time, get yourself ready. Hey, if it doesn't work out for you, I got a home for you here. I got something for you to do here. I'll make sure you take care.
That's
leadership.
I know the mentality wasn't always like that.
No.
And it was one of those things. It was one of those, "Oh, you don't want to be in the regiment anymore."
Yeah.
All right. Well, you better pass.
Yeah. No, it definitely was. And so, I mean, that's what was cool, is that you did have some NCOs that kind of led you to now later on become the same type of leader. Hey, doesn't work out, you still have a home back here. I mean, if nothing else, you should be looking at it as a leader perspective of, hey, you're wanting to go aspire to do something.
Absolutely.
Right? Even if it's not entirely aligned, it's very different. Going through selection there is not quite as rigid and regimented and everything else. And so it's a whole different type of mindset and the whole bit. But there still could have been some greatness that could have came back. Like you said, you found yourself through the process.
Yeah. We've had people come back and just, "Welcome back."
Yeah.
How'd it go?
Yeah. I mean, how many guys go to do the long walk? They pass the selection, they go to OTC, and then.
Yeah. So, when I was in different HRC, and then I think when I was at as the RSM and sergeant major at 175, there were instances where hey, so and so had an issue at OTC and he needs to come back. We guys take him back, and we would find a home for him. Figure it out. So yeah, absolutely.
That's tough.
Well, you guys had a similar crossing around this time frame, right, with Ramadi, or?
Yeah. Well, Dan Pinion. So we had Dan Pinion on. Daniel Pinion was the command sergeant major for 3-1 Cav. So that was with 3rd ID when it was still on Kelly Hill. So we were away from the flagpole. But he wrote the, chop that shit up. We had him on before. Forget the episode that was on. We did it in my living room.
I'll put it on the bottom here. I can't remember. Yeah, we did do it in his living room.
Absolutely amazing story. Every time I hear him talk about it, I cry. But he was a platoon sergeant and then a first sergeant in Ramadi, and he's got some stories. But from 03, and then Jocko was down there with him.
What year Ramadi was that? What year Ramadi?
I think 03. He said.
I think 03.
Yeah.
We were there 04.
Yeah.
He lost a lot of guys there, and his book, The Chop That Shit Up, has more to do with the story of something that happened in a latrine. Yeah. But it's kind of a funny story, but the book is more Dan trying to share stories of his soldiers that really went beyond the call of duty in so many different ways, and ended up as casualties or lost their lives, and he wanted to He wanted to tell their stories. He felt like he didn't do a good enough job himself while he was on active duty as a sergeant major. That's his thinking, and he probably did, but this is his opportunity to say, hey, I want to memorialize this. Look what these guys did.
Yeah. All the proceeds for the book go to the families, go to scholarships.
Oh, nice.
Like, he hasn't made a penny off the book. In fact, he's trying to rectify a situation to where one of his soldiers, he believes, and I believe, I think everybody does, earned the Medal of Honor, jumped on a grenade, had the opportunity to be safe, jumped on a grenade and saved, all of his battle buddies. So, I mean, these are the things that he's pushing for, but, all those stories came out of Ramadi. So we were curious about your experience in Ramadi and what you took away from that.
Yeah, it wasn't, when I was there, so we went in January 2004, and we were working with, some of the guys, right? And then it wasn't as violent during our time in Ramadi. We spent a good time down in Fallujah, actually.
Okay.
We would drive down to Fallujah quite a bit and work out of there. And just as the Marines were getting ready to hand that over, we were getting ready, the 82nd was getting ready to hand that over to the Marines.
Yeah.
So that was, but it was still sporty down there, right? For some, for what we were focused on at the time, it wasn't at the time, we were really strategically, I think they were looking at, hey, we need to make sure that Fallujah doesn't turn bad, which of course, as we all know, it did, right? And so how do we strategically, do that and make an impact down there so it doesn't during and after the transition to the Marines. And that's, so we spent quite a bit of time down there. We spent a couple of, we did a little bit in Ramadi, but it just wasn't as volatile then during our time.
Yeah.
And we just weren't spending the time there. I forget what unit. There was a battalion out of Riley that was there. And they were a tank battalion. I don't remember what unit it was. Their sergeant major was awesome. Their commander didn't like us. He didn't like that we had to stay on the post that they were at.
Absolutely.
And until I won't finish the story anyway. But the sergeant major was great, right? And he really kind of took care of us because it was just a platoon. It was just my platoon, and I was a E6 promotable platoon sergeant at the time. And because they didn't have a PL, so the actual platoon sergeant was Anderson, and I were kind of PL platoon sergeants together. And this was right after I got back from the long walk, and then they put me in that position, and we deployed.
Oh, wow!
Right. So then that was, So jumped right into that. So and it was my old platoon, right? So I'd come back, and I was in 3rd platoon, the squad leader. They needed a platoon sergeant. I was the only available E6 promotable. And they, hey, come over, be the platoon sergeant for your old platoon, and then go to Iraq with them. So yeah.
When he was doing that in 2004, I just got down there. I was at Farron-Huggins with 1-7 Cav. So we were doing a lot of, the Southwest Baghdad, Route Irish, all the way into Bayab. That's when the IEDs were starting to become prevalent.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we took over for 82nd. 82nd had the foot mounts on the outside of the doors, and they were just, it was.
So Matt Leclair was down there.
Yeah.
He was that's where he was down at
Wild West.
Down there at the camp right below Fallujah. I can't remember the name of it. He'll probably call me later and when he hears this, he'll let me know. But yeah, it's he was down there at that time. So yeah, we were driving down to Fallujah in like slicked out Humvees, right?
It was
just I think back on that. And at one point, I remember Bob Shalala was like, hey, we need to put some sandbags or something in that thing, build some some protection for you guys. Because we had Panders, but we also had the Humvees, right? And then, so it was the slicked out Humvees at that time. And that's when the ID started, like you said, in about February, March of 04 is when the insurgency kind of really started happening, and the IEDs and that started to kind of go before Fallujah fell. And that was kind of the turning point of like Iraq at that point.
Yeah. It's because you could roll the roads, right? You could take any of the routes, and you might hit a tick, right? Some RPG, something. Then all of a sudden they started, command detonating things, and you start seeing wires, and then you start getting these reports and these info flashes that are like, hey, watch out for trash on the side of the road.
Yeah, like trash, exactly.
Well, holy shit, all of Route Irish was the trash point. On the side of the road,
that was,
right?
That was the kind of the pointer for, who was running it. When they got next to the trash bag, you blew it up, yeah. And
that was like, I know you remember this, all the fuel that they used to have on the side of the roads, because people pull up, fuel up, and go. And so when these IEDs started getting pretty popular, we had to start pushing the fuel off the side of the road because you didn't know if they were going to, you know, use that as a secondary device. It got bad.
Were you the first sergeant of Cal at the time frame?
No, no. I was a staff sergeant at the time. And so I was down there with 1/7 Cav. Okay. When they turned Fair and Huggins, it was Fob Falcon. And they turned it into Fair and Huggins. They named it after. It got pretty spicy. So
fast forwarding 2009, you had mentioned that you became a first sergeant later on at first. In 2009, you went to first battalion and stuff. And what did you start off as initially in 175?
They brought me in to be the ops sergeant major. Ops
sergeant, okay.
So, you know, obviously an E9 position, right? So they had, there was a couple of events happened, and they weren't going to have an ops sergeant major in the near future. And they were, and then the person who they were going to fleet up, something happened to that person, and they weren't. I was like this free-floating master sergeant, right? Getting ready to come out of, I did my own orders back to 375. I was heading back, right, to 375.
Hey, y'all, I got this.
Yeah, and no interest in going anywhere else, right? So, and then, you know, I went down to the 175 change of command when Nick Bielek was taken over for Dennis Smith, and RSM was there, Chris Hardy, respected a lot, and he's like, hey, what do you think about, when first Dennis Smith told me, I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And then, you know, Sergeant Major Hardy was like, hey, what do you think about coming down here and being the ops for a while? And then I think I can get you into a company here quicker than you'll probably get at one of the 375. And I was like, let me go home and talk to the family, and did, and we all agreed we would do it. And that's how I ended up there. So yeah, it was just, you know, again, you know, like I said, when we talked to Matt's podcast, you know, it's kind of like the timing, right? Like just, there's certain things in your career where it's all about timing, right? And it just happened to, you know, there were other options that he could have pulled. And he told me that if you can't do it, I understand, you know, you were already kind of promised to go back there, but I just figured I have other options, but I wanted to bring it to you because you're kind of you're in the midst of getting ready to move. So maybe you can change course and do that. And I thought, you know, I highly respected him and noted him. He was my first sergeant back in Charlie Company 375. And I was like, oh, I have to RSM ask you to do that. I think I'm just going to try to do that.
So when you were in 375, did you do any, you did some ops time there as well, right? Some time of, staff time, yeah.
I just did a short stint over at S2 as the NCOIC there. That was in between when I came back from the Iraq deployment as an interim platoon sergeant. I got pulled over to staff for a cycle, and then we got back from the next deployment is when I went in. I got my E7, and I went in as a platoon sergeant.
So I wanted to kind of highlight that because I think it's important too for guys in their career to understand the importance of having some of this round out staff time. So you're S2, then you become Ops S3 Sergeant Major.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're rounding out your portfolio here. You kind of do an S1 by being HRC. So now you've got the 1 shop, the 2 shop, 3 shop. You got line time. You've kind of checked the block here.
Yeah. So the Ops Sergeant Major thing that was another one that was a little intimidating to me, right? Because I had spent time over in the S2 staff, but you know, it's not, I ran backside support and I did some things like that, but I wasn't in like the operations piece of it, right? So coming in to be the ops was a little intimidating, right? And I was going to a battalion where I really didn't know a whole lot of people. I knew a few people, a couple of my buddies, you know, Adam Nash was over there as a first sergeant, and there were a few other people that I knew, but that was it, you know? So, you know, learning the land of 175 in Savannah, learning that position, learning all the people and everything. Fortunately, in a good way, when I got there, I kind of got my gear and I deployed. So it was an opportunity to get over and then kind of start figuring out, you know, working through what that job was. And then, you know, I'm doing the deployment piece. We were in Salerno at that time. So when I got back, then I went into the seat and I kind of was the ops for another 3 months. And then, you know, things again happened. And then I ended up going and taking Charlie Company 375.
3 months isn't bad.
No, but I mean, the fact that you got thrown into ops in combat or in a deployment type of environment, to me, that's a great way to learn rather quickly, but it would have been nice to have your feet wet a little bit more by, you know, setting up ranges and going, you know what I mean? Just all the Because when you came back, you were a seasoned op guy by that time frame. You probably had seen everything that you needed to do to run the 3 shop.
Yeah, and so just because we were deployed, I mean, so when you're deployed, you're still having to take care of stuff in the rear, right? So you're still planning out the training calendar for the next training cycle.
Sure.
You're still doing all those meetings and stuff. So
For the guys that are not deployed.
That's right. And for
people returning.
And for the people returning, and for the next training cycle when you get back. So you're really doing that ops sergeant major job, and you're the ops for, that fire base that I was at.
Yeah. So he's doing joint operations. He's doing coup ops, foo ops. He's got it all. And it's accelerated. So when I did ops sergeant major time, I've got the horse blanket. It takes me out. We work off a patch chart, and that's a couple of years down the line. So it's a lot easier to negotiate. I never would have thought about, you guys take a trip 3-4 months long, and you're having to wash, rinse, repeat.
Yeah. So, and it was a little challenging too, because the S3 at the time, Major Burgess had taken over the S3. He was in Kandahar. So like we were kind of separated, right?
Oh.
So the XO was with me, was Colonel Brown, Major Brown at the time. And he just got there like 3 days before me, right? So like we're kind of like figuring it out together. But it was good that we all... I thought it was better actually to kind of be deployed. Okay, I'm over here, I'm doing this, but I'm able to kind of ease into the ops piece. And I had a good team, in the 3 shop, back in the rear. I had a really good team of people like Jesse Yandel and a few others that were able to kind of, Quint Pospisil was in the ops, in Jacobs was there. So I had a really good team in the 3 shop, both forward and back, that we were all talking and kind of working together. And they kind of helped me through a lot of that, right?
Yeah. So then you rolled over into you got your first sergeant slot, and you went to Charlie Company.
Yep.
Same, just like you did at 375,
Yeah.
Charlie Company. And you were total first sergeant for what, 2 years?
Yeah, 2 years. When in February, came out in the spring, a little over like 26 months, something like that. Yeah.
So then you ended up deploying with them as well.
3 times. 3 times as the first sergeant. And we did the surge back in 2010. So, yeah. So, which was probably, those were tough times. The regiment was taking, we had taken a lot of losses, a lot of casualties at that time. And we, 175 had taken 7 that deployment. And we had, Kurt Donaldson went forward 6 weeks early, and then I stayed back 6 weeks. So I didn't get home until December, and we left the last day of July. So I got home like right before Christmas, I think it was. The rest of us did. So it was like 5 months, which, hey, for like, I was like, you guys, like conventional force, 5 months. I mean, we doing 12 months, right? But, we were getting ready to turn and burn again. Like, I came home. And then, we went on some leave, and like 3 weeks later, we're doing MLAT, so
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's like you have a second home,
Yeah.
Did you know of Philip Simpao?
Yes. Yes, there's a lot of people, anybody who's going to watch this who knows.
Good old Phil Simpao. He's a Benning.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I haven't run into him in years. He was he was a platoon sergeant for us, at 2 Charlie when I was there.
Yeah.
I was a team leader, and he was my platoon sergeant.
Yeah, good old Phil.
Brett Johnson, Brett Johnson there, or was he?
Brett was, he was a platoon sergeant in Charlie Company. And when I deployed, we went to Salerno, and Charlie Company was in Salerno with us. So that's how I met Brett Johnson. He was a platoon sergeant. He was a senior platoon sergeant, and he was getting ready to leave there to go and take over the RASP program, he was taking over the RASP program.
Yeah, that's when he told the story about going, and they came to him and asked him to stand up. So it's funny, did he go and stand up the RASP program, and then you had, as a first sergeant, had to go and go through it?
No, so he was getting there about the same time. He came over about the same time I was going through the program, but Caprati was kind of running it. So they had asked Brett to come in and kind of like refocus the whole thing, I think, is how as I remember how it went. So it was already kind of stood up. Initially, I'd run a few courses through there, and I think they wanted Brett, and you could probably tell better than me. Obviously, he lived it, but they wanted him to kind of really evolve it, right, in both programs. So he didn't come over and was like my cadre for it or anything, but he was going through kind of like getting processed and everything from 175 when I was going through RASP 2 in that was like January or something like that. Command
Sergeant Major Teagle? Was that Reese? Reese Teagle?
Yep, yeah.
I love that guy. We're trying to get him on here too.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so he knows.
Teakle?
You know, well, Teakle was actually the SVAC CSM, but Teakle spent all of his time in the regiment, and well, not all of his time. He did brigade CSM over there.
He's one of the few. I think Reese is probably one of the few Somali vets still left on active duty.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's the type of guy that can walk into a room with no rank, and you would think after he speaks that he's probably a field grade or a GO, just by the way that he speaks and his knowledge base. And then he turns around and you see the chevrons and the rockers. You're like, oh, wow.
Yeah. He just left CTAF-AF.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, he just left. I'm not sure what he's what his next move
I'm trying
is,
to run him down.
Yeah, he was over in Italy doing that, and I think he just changed over a few weeks ago, actually.
Yeah.
So this is about the same time frame where that one of your last deployments, Matt Leclair, then becomes the CEO, and you're the first sergeant. I have to ask you, which I thought that was a hilarious story. We won't get into it and stuff. Go listen to the Teach Me to Fish podcast when you were on there. As a funny story about running into Matt and meeting him for the first time, but you know, because of what happened with him.
Yeah.
But in terms of, like, you know, Matt being former enlisted in the regiment, coming back as an officer, and now being a new company commander, and you're the first sergeant, having been there for a period of time. And I think timing wise, you guys would have been about the same rank had he continued on in the enlisted level. What was that like, in having a commander who at least was a former enlisted guy?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I can't say enough about that guy. He's one of my best friends. And, you know, so Matt had come in, I think he came in the Army about 2 years before me, actually. He came in like maybe 4, I think it was. So he was a couple years senior to me, because he just passed 30, and I just retired at 28 and some change. So it was great. I got to know him when he got down to Salerno. He seemed like a common sense guy, right? So I'm like, I had to have been an NCO. And at some point, and he was just, you know, he was a common sense guy. He seemed like a good person, and he was motivated. Could ask him to do anything, he would do it. Like, he was great people. And so when they said he was going to be the backfill Stephen Dobbins, I was pretty happy about that. You know, so he kind of, you know, he had the experience of being enlisted, and he kind of knew some, you know, and he was very Matt Leclair is very tactically sound, and he knows what it takes to, like, train Rangers, train soldiers on what they need to do and be successful. And he cares about people too. He's got a great family. I mean, he knows kind of those things, right? He's kind of, and there's, you know, I just never ran into anybody who doesn't like Matt Leclair.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So he's very personable.
If they are, then please reach out and let us know. We'd like to hear that story. We'd like to hear that story.
So yeah, it was a great. And I was, you know, we only got one go around together, one training cycle and one deployment together, and then I parted ways with him, and then we've always stayed in touch.
Oh, that was quick.
Yeah, so it was. I was on the back end of my time. I had done 2 rotations with Stephen over to Afghanistan in 10 and 11, and then we ended up going back. Me and Matt actually went back to where Stephen and I were the last time, was in Helmand. We went down to Helmand, so we were down there with the Marines for 2 cycles. You know, so if you didn't spend any time in Helmand, you didn't miss a whole lot. So I would tell you, it's some pretty rough terrain down there. You know, people talk about kind of like the Konar, which is tough as well, and different the Pesh and places like that. But, and if you haven't stomped around in the poppy fields down in Helmand, there's irrigation ditches and things like that. I mean, in the summer, right, of Helmand, right? It's a whole new experience for sure. So, but it was great to be with him down there, at least go to the rotation.
What do you think about those guys who then, like Leclair, that end up going from enlisted to officer? Do you encourage guys to do that, or when you were in, or what's your kind of thought on that? Because some guys are looking for warrant officers, some guys are looking to become, you know, career progression as an NCO. Do you have
Are you speaking like returning back to the regiment? Or
no, just in general.
I have some. We have a commonality, and we talked about him before. It was Kevin Humphreys.
Right. You've talked to me a lot about him.
Yeah. I mean, eventually he'll come out of the shadows, and we might have him on here.
Well, not just that, but the impression he left on the young soldiers, like even Kyle and stuff.
Yeah. It was the common sense. I think you alluded to it earlier. It's just, yeah. He can speak more about it. In fact, tell him about what you were saying so he goes OCS, he comes in lieutenant, and he goes back to the regiment. And we all know, you know, you just don't go back to the regiment as a lieutenant.
Well, he was the first Louis.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how was that?
Yeah. So he was as I remember, he was one of the first I'd ever seen to come back as a first lieutenant, right? First lieutenant, right? Yeah. So, you know, he did well. You know, I mean, he's a great NCO. I remember when he was in E6 and then he went and did it. To answer your question, I always encourage guys, if you want to stay in the Army and do something else, I'm glad you're staying in the Army. What can I help you do that you want to do something else, right? Hey, you want to go be an officer? I think that's a great track, right? I mean, you look at kind of the officer path compared to the NCOs. I mean, I wouldn't trade being an NCO for the world, but at the same time, the officer track is a pretty good track, right? I mean, when we were talking about it today at the headquarters about like there's certain times they take the officer and say, hey, go do education and kind of professionally improve yourself, right? And there's really not a whole lot of time in the NCO track to do that, right? So you got guys like me and the RSM and others who are working on their masters right now while they're in these key positions, right? Because they haven't had the opportunity to do that, right? So I always encourage guys, green or gold or whatever it is. Warrant, I know a ton of Rangers that have gone warrant and then gone flying for the 160th and been hugely successfve, right?
That's
hugely successful. So, and if, I think anybody who leaves that organization and goes and does something in the Army is going to be, they always seem to go and be successful.
Yeah. I've even tried to do that as a leader, even on the private sector side, and people thought I was crazy, but it's like, I'd rather keep you here or keep you within the organization than it is to lose you altogether. So, I mean, if these guys don't feel like they're being valued and they can't see a path to becoming an officer or a warrant officer and they're enlisted as kind of stagnant or whatever, they're just not enjoying themselves, then we have to provide as leaders those opportunities. Hey, go be something. Just stay.
Yeah.
Just stay.
And it was always nice to see some, you once in a while you see, some officers, captains or colonels, talking to these young, Rangers about like, hey, have you ever thought about going to prep school and then going on to West Point? Because, like the Army gets a certain amount of West Point and they never slots every year and they never fill them. Right. I mean, it's one, like, I think the company commander can actually sign one of the sign-offs to get you up to West Point. And
I think you're right.
Right. So it's super easy, and it would be great to see. And I know it happens once in a while, but probably not enough. There was a kid who's Dan Wilcox, who is, I think he's still a regiment now. I think he's a cyber intel is what he was a private, and then he got his Ranger tab, and then he went to prep, and then he went to West Point and got his commission. And then I see him in Iraq at like outside of Abu Ghraib, and he's like a captain down there. Right? And I'm like, oh my God, right? So I mean, there's those opportunities. So to go back to what you're saying, I forget who said it, but like they said, hey, if I can encourage somebody to stay in the Army, I don't need them to stay here. I just need them to stay in the Army. So how can I help them achieve that, be successful in the Army and do something they really want to do?
How many guys did you see like Leclair, though, go on to be a full bird? I think that's kind of a rare thing.
I know one.
You do?
Yeah. Colonel Furtick.
Oh, Furtick.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few.
Yeah.
There's a few, but not a whole lot, right? Yeah. So, I mean, you do your enlisted time and then go over to green to gold and then come back as an officer. Most of them by major, lieutenant colonel, they kind of like time out. Matt's kind of, he's past 30, right? So I mean, he's on the other end of this thing. So he's doing it all for the love of what he loves to do, right? People, yeah.
I think the impact they have is great, though. Even at the company grade, field grade officer, and they're still there making that impact with the soldiers and still doing it one-on-one, right? That 5 meter leader.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, he can, so I don't want to make this about Matt Leclair because, I don't want to make his head too good, but he's already rated like one of the top podcasts. I want to keep talking about him. But like guys like him, like people gravitate towards them. They want to be led by people like him because he can relate to them, and he shows that empathy, and he's just very relatable.
Yeah. I want to now jump into, forward and stuff. After that, you went up to JSOC, right? Up in Virginia?
I did. Yep.
Cybersecurity sergeant.
Cyber unit up there. Yep. It was stationed out of, it still is, but I was in Crystal City at the time. I did that coming out of first sergeant, and then I was back in the ops seat for a turn, back as the ops sergeant major. Again, some things happened. Some things happened with timing, and they didn't have a backfill for that position. And the backfill they had was actually Adam Nash, and he'd been selected for sergeant major, and he was going to go to the academy. He's going to do JSOC, and he wanted to give him the time to do that. So they asked me to come out and to move up and be the ops sergeant major while he did that. And I said, yeah, no problem. So I did that, and then I got selected for sergeant major the next go around in the next list. And then I ended up going to JSOC, and then through another turn of events and some things that happened in my personal life, I decided to compete for that job with JSOC, and I got that job, and then went up there March of 2014.
That's kind of like a fish out of water in a sense, right?
Oh, yeah.
Can you let them know what JSOC is?
Yeah.
Just for the people.
Yeah, for the people.
Joint Special Operations Academy, Enlisted Academy. So that is kind of an equivalent. So it's, SOCOM set that up. Greg Smith and them set that up end of 2010, somewhere around in there. And they set up a course equivalent to like the E9 Sergeant Major Academy and all the other E9 academies that are around the services, right? But it's a joint, so it's all joint special operations. You go there and you're there with SEALs and Green Berets and MARSOC and all the different tribes, right? And you get more of a joint flavor of education on being senior enlisted. Yeah.
And we still had special operations come through the normal academy. So, class 67, I still had, Green Berets coming through. And so.
Yeah, it's not, it's not everybody gets a slot. It's like, I think when I just left down there, it was only slotted for 60 personnel 4 times a year.
Yeah.
When you think about all branches, like you just said, Air Force, Army, Navy, that's not very many slots.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's an accelerated program too, right?
It is. So it's 6 weeks, 6 months online. So distance learning. And then you're down there for almost about 40 days, 45 days in resident in Tampa. So that's where I had gone. So I went down there, did that, and then came back to Savannah and packed my stuff and then moved up to DC.
So cybersecurity, I mean, like I said, fish out of water.
Yeah, it did a little bit more than that, but it was definitely, so kind of cyber intel, the whole kind of gamut. I just looked at it as like, I kind of needed a change of life at the time. I was kind of going through some stuff where I felt like, I love the Ranger Regiment, love to stay. Maybe here's an opportunity to step away and see something different, right? So I felt like I've never been one I've always been one to kind of get out, feel like I want to get out of my comfort zone and do things. And that's, the HRC and a couple other things. I just felt like, hey, maybe that'll be a great opportunity, right? So I went up and did that and had an amazing time. They're amazing people. It was a great unit trying to grow. Had 2 great commanders, and Todd Massengill and Chris Rizzo came in after him, and, former Ranger, special ops guy, and just had a great time. Both of them
had to go through a assessment for them, did
No, so I was a smooth board.
Okay.
So mine was a smooth board. So I got selected on the smooth board, and then, I'd gone up there, and the guy who was in the job, a guy named Glover, was in the job, and I'd gone up and talked to him about kind of what it was and stuff, so kind of get a feel for what it really was, and I still didn't really have a good kind of understanding of what that was until I got in the seat. But it was an amazing opportunity and some great people.
How long did you end up staying there?
2 years.
And then what happened after that?
I was selected to come back to 175.
Okay.
I was selected to come back to regiment, and then so I got 175, and Reese actually was on the same list as me, and then he came and went to RSTB.
Nice.
Yeah.
So once you went to 175, when did it happen that you ended up becoming the Regimental Sergeant Major?
They talked to me about competing. It happened very fast, actually. I got there in March, so 2 years. So I was back in Savannah in March of 16. And then I think it was like the next spring, I was, they wanted to know what I wanted to do, be competing. So I can't remember I think it was the end of 16. Or beginning sometime in 17 when, that the smooth list came out, and I was selected to be RSM.
Wow.
That's huge.
Oh, it is huge.
I don't think people understand how big.
No, how that's a huge thing.
You make it sound so,
they just,
Yeah,
it's like he took a number at the barber shop.
It's very surreal, right? It becomes very surreal. Like you kind of made it to that, that point, right? And I kind of looked at it as an opportunity to like, okay, here's this organization that I deeply love and been such a big part of, I feel like, and now here's an opportunity to kind of give back, right? Like, hey, what can I do to make this organization even better than it is, or be somewhat of an influence, and then, kind of put those things into place. So, when I leave, like, all leaders, like, you want to leave it better than you found it, right? So then that's kind of what I kind of envisioned there. I knew it was going to be, that's a busy job, right? That's a very busy job. Anybody who's ever been in that job or seen that job knows kind of what, that position does and has to deal with. You're kind of dealing with like, I call it like the three-headed hydra, right? So like you have the Army that you're dealing with, because you're part of the Army. Like, and I like the rest of the SMUs where they're like kind of separated from their service. Like you're part of the Army, and the Army expects you to be part of them, right? And then you have, JSOC, it's just kind of your operational arm, and then you have USOC, which is kind of your man train and equip piece, right?
On a TRADOC installation.
Right, on a TRADOC installation, right? So
that's always fun.
Yeah, but I honestly, I always had, being either 175 or at Benning, I always thought we had good relationships with the post, with TRADOC, with the base and everything. I think we always had good relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to work on those relationships, right? But I always thought we had very good ties in with everybody and made good with all that.
There's good continuity. I mean, you still have people that, leave the Ranger Regiment and they end up going to, 3rd ID, 3rd Brigade, 3rd ID. And there's a lot of good tie-ins, and then you learn how to work together. And yeah, I like the relationship that we had with the regiment when I was there as a first sergeant, because we learned a lot. We had medical training. We talked about it before: shoot, move, communicate, medicate. We were using the master breacher range that was, off the installation. Just great training that you wouldn't typically get if you were, just, I don't know what kind of relationship you guys had with 3rd ID, the headquarters, when you were at Hunter Army Airfield. Pretty good.
TAG was when I was a CSM, TAG was the CSM over there. And we had a good relationship. This is when the time about we were doing kind of and implemented the charter piece. So I was looking to get people over there to do charter at 3rd ID and then bring them back. So I kind of worked with him. He was great. And then Hendricks was the next guy. And then, and the commanders were always good relationship with 3rd ID. Again, like you want to make good with them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're not really in your chain of command, but they're kind of taking care of you and you need something. So always good relationship with 3rd ID, I thought.
And Stewart has a really big footprint.
So we do all our training down there. You're 175, there's no training on Hunter Army Airfield, right? You got to go out to Stewart and use all their ranges, which they have a great complex down there. So you kind of need that support from them.
Yeah.
I think you wrote about it or somebody captured it within an article when you were getting ready to leave regiment about what makes regiment different. And I think Brett also talked about it as well. That's the big 5: marksmanship, physical training, medical training, small unit tactics, and mobility.
Yep.
And do you think that there's an opportunity within the conventional Army to do a lot more of understanding that? I think they did try to. During the 20-year war, there was a lot of that was going on, or at least, an emphasis placed on that. But why hasn't that crossed over a lot more?
When we started right around the 2002, 2003, and then, we get into this mindset where everybody's a soldier, everybody's an infantryman, right? I think the Army as a whole, conventionally, we tried to get too sexy too fast. And everybody wanted to be special. Everybody wanted to kick in a door and pie a corner and do all these things. And when you do that, you get away from the basics. So it's hard to get back to teaching people, hey, shoot, move, communicate, medicate. Can you do all that? If you can't do that, then we need to get back to that. So just, when people are transitioning all the time and the missions are changing, you're constantly deploying. You get the mission set, you're like, this is what we're going to be doing, and you train specifically for that mission instead of getting back to the basics. Yeah, we're going to do individual training, and then we're going to, compound all the way up to the unit eval, because we need to be ready to deploy.
Right. I think the Army is, as what the Army is doing now, kind of getting back to that warfighter mentality, right? I think you'll see them getting back to the basics of that, right? So I think you're probably right. There's, everybody wanted to be sexy and kick doors and everything, and kind of got away from the basics. Where I think, again, with this warfighter, getting everybody into the warfighter mindset, and where the Army's trying to go is like, hey, we have to be ready to fight tonight. Like everybody needs to be ready. And what does that take? Knowing the basics. So I would hope that the Army is like moving in that direction as well, which I would think they are.
Yeah.
I saw a taste of it when I was touching Mike. Saw a taste of it as I was leaving. I mean, we're you know, if you're not deploying as much, what can we do? Well, every day is a training event, right?
It should be.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the whole idea behind it. But I think now that when there's not some place to deploy to, or there's not a combat situation, you know, you get back to that garrison mode in the conventional army, especially, and it's just go down the motor pool, clean, you know, some track or break some track or just whatever, you know.
Late 90s, early 2000s, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys had missions. You had real world things going on. I had Bosnia, I had Kosovo. Nothing was really happening until, you know, 2003, right?
Yeah.
Desert Storm. But everything that we were training for was the Mad Horde, the Russian, it was all Russian doctrine.
Absolutely.
Right? So,
Pull the gap.
yeah, exactly. And you remember that.
Yeah, I was there.
So it was all, it would, and we used to call it high intensity combat back in the day, you know?
Yeah, I remember that.
So,
yeah, a lot of, you know, the time before, you know, 9/11, it was definitely, you know, tons of training, opportunities. You know, there was a Haiti incident. I almost went to Haiti at one point. Right before I got there was the Haiti piece.
You were in the air, weren't you?
No, I was before. It was probably about a year before I got there when the Haiti. But most of my friends were, when I got to the time and told us, they were all in the airstrip. They were waiting to go, and they called it off, right? But you know, there were a couple other times where, you know, hey, we think this is, you know, there's something going on. We're gonna send you guys, and then it got pulled. You know, but like when 9/11 happened, like we were all kind of like, hey, okay, this is it. And we're definitely, something's going to happen this time.
yeah.
Yeah.
I look back on the episodes that we did the very first time that we went to Ranger Regiment. We were, I believe, the first podcast that were ever allowed to get inside Ranger Regiment. And people, when they saw the photos after we left there of us taking pictures of ourselves, or somebody actually taking pictures of us inside the foyer, with the beautiful, you know, floor, we're freaking out like, what, you guys? And so, I mean, here you are putting your phones and sensitive items and everything outside. You're walking inside, you know, with this, I've got all kinds of gear, microphones, you know, the whole bit inside there. And I think that was right around 20. Were you there at that time frame? I can't recall.
Is that when you did you do it? Something more with with Brett?
No, it was before all of that. It was actually, we did an episode about the recruiting side of it to talk about, you know, why you want to be a Ranger and everything. Yeah. And then we did a RASP episode at that time frame.
I think I was there. I switched out with Kurt Donaldson February of 2020.
Okay, so then it would probably would have hit.
Yeah, it probably would have been him. So, I mean, the foyer, you know, we do all kinds of events there. I mean, you know, it's unclassed space, right? I mean, do all kinds of promotions and ceremonies and stuff in the foyer there. It's very nice. If you never, it's pretty awesome. A lot of history
it's
there.
A nice floor, yeah. The little history walls that they've got back there in the back, very nice.
Yeah. And so it's pretty cool. So I'm not really sure whether it's worked up about, but I mean, it's, you know, it's an unsecure place.
They were worked up. You had a whole bunch of tabless people walking through their building.
No, it was more guys that had been in regiment and, you know, bad boys and stuff.
Yeah.
And so they saw it and they said, what, you know, you guys actually were able to,
no, not even close.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So fast forward, after leaving the Regimental Sergeant Major, you know, Brett now is up at 10th Mountain and everything, and you almost wonder, like, what is next after that? Where did you end up going?
I ended up going to South Africa. So I went to a TSOC. So for those who don't know what a TSOC is, it's the Theater Special Operations Command that are geographically aligned with the COCOMs, right? So you got so each COCOM has their own, so they all have components from the services, and then they have a couple other different kind of units, like AFRICOM has CTAF-AF and, you know, HOA, and they have SOC Africa. So each one has that Special Operations Command, who basically implements kind of campaign plan, implements people down on wherever their geographic location is, the campaign plan, special operations flavor, right? So that's what we did. I had opportunity, so I came out. I was, you know, I was the first RSM not to, you know, I went and did a TSOC. No other Ranger had ever done a TSOC. Generally, the SF community and some of the others, some other communities, you know, kind of aspired to do those. I knew a lot of guys. I'd been joint, right? So with JSOC, and I'd been joint overseas, and it's just something that I found interesting. I knew most all the TSOC Sergeant Majors, so I was getting kind of, hey, what is the job like? What does it entail? I'm like, again, I wanted to do something a little bit different, right? And I wanted to do that. And so I competed for SOC Africa, and General Dag Anderson, Air Force 2-star, hired me. And this was like right, and then COVID kicked off. And then they kind of had to wait at Benning for a while after Kurt and I changed. And then I went out there summer 2020 to Stuttgart. And then I stayed out there 2 years and did a year with General Anderson. And then he left. And then Rear Admiral Sands came in and took over the last.
So it was Stuttgart. So a company toured then. The family went.
Yeah. Yes, the family went. So we were right in Stuttgart. Kelly Barracks, stayed there in a house. It's probably one of my favorite assignments. It was great.
Germany's amazing.
So Germany's amazing. Europe is amazing. And then I was down on the continent quite a bit. Once COVID kind of lifted, we were able to travel. Love the continent of Africa, but if opportunities to do things down there again came,
we know somebody. We can get a hookup now.
We do. Your last guest, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I mean, it was an amazing mission, and we worked with third group and second group from SWIC or SEALs and NSW and MARSOC. We had those underneath us as well. It was just great. I mean, you're kind of like straddling your working strategy, with your boss, on things on the continent, but you're also kind of down at the operation tactical level, going out to the bases and seeing the guys and what they're doing. Just kind of the full gamut. It was a great experience.
And not a lot of people get the opportunity to do joint. So for the audience, when you talk about the COCOM, it's a combatant commands, and then you were regionally aligned with them. So each of the combatant commands has its own. And then for the joint piece, a lot of us only serve with just the Army. So if you're in the Army, you just serve with the Army. And then a lot of the SOCOM, you guys get to do more joint. So you work, along with the different services, which is a big deal. So
what do you think then about, there's always going to be evaluation about special operations units, MARSOC versus Ranger versus whatever. There's always this versus, and there's not really a competition going on here. There is for dollars on occasion, but there has also been still this rumor that they're going to be evaluating at some point whether or not we need all of the different special operations that we currently have. What's your thoughts on that?
I think we've been talking about that for a long time, right? And I think for somebody to really pull the trigger on that, I mean, they've been talking about doing away with MARSOC since they started it up, since it was born, right? And it's still around. And that command does great stuff. I know a lot of those guys. I know a lot of the command, and they do great stuff, right? And each of the tribes, kind of special operations tribes, kind of has their specific deal. I think what they're really looking at is like, hey, where are we doing the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. So like, hey, does SF need dive people when we have the SEALs and we got a MARSOC dive? Like, are we doing it, not picking on the dive community, but like those are kind of the conversations, right? Like, hey, are we doing, dual things that we could like save money and focus on something else, right? Yeah. And I think it just needs to be like, who's going to have that hard conversation and then like actually pull the trigger? And no one's really been able to do that yet. Yeah. So my opinion is, I mean, if where we are, funding wise, what DOD is like looking for like at near peer stuff in the next wars and how we need to defend the country. Like, where do we need to really put our resources? Like, where can we like move some money and move resources to something else?
I think when it became, it makes big sense. So I think when it became, really kinetic, there was a lot of people kicking in doors and there were a lot of overlaps and stuff because you needed the manpower. That's when 18 X-ray really got big. We started getting a lot of SF. We needed those guys. And so I think what you're talking about is there's an evolution that always happens. This is the next iteration, the next evolution that we're discussing about how can special operations not step on one another unless it's needed, but where it's not, where can we find, parallel paths?
Yeah.
So there's synergies and then sometimes there shouldn't be. And I think that's what you're kind of saying.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's an important factor. And you have a lot of guys they're looking at getting into the service that might be listening to this and they're somewhat confused about the different special operations. I think at times each one of them has a role and responsibility. They all perform a really important role as well when the time comes. So we're not all competing, special operations, I should say, they're not all competing for the same opportunities, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. If you're out there and you're thinking about, coming into the, serving in the military and you're, which special operations unit, do I want to go to? You want to go to the 75th Ranger Regiment. No, yeah.
Hey, so I got,
and then the rest,
talk to my son. Don't tell him that he's a Marine. He already went to MARSOC selection once, and he got a swift kick in the ass of reality. And so, but now he has the taste in his mouth. So now he wants to go back. But
I think everybody, in all seriousness, I think everybody kind of is drawn to specific things, right? People are drawn to want to be a Green Beret. They have a long lineage, a great history, right? There, I see that. I see why people want to be, drawn to the SEALs. They have all the tribes, all the different special operations have something, right? And each person is drawn to something. Hey, I want to go be a SEAL. I want to, do underwater demolitions. I want to do all, the cool stuff that I see and jump out of, do halos and stuff like that. Everybody's kind of drawn to that, right? I just, me personally, I was drawn to the Rangers, and I kind of, I'm happy that I was.
And, I think, the Rangers is a great stepping stone into, let's face it, a lot of the guys I know that went to JSOC or ended up going to a SMU and everything came from Ranger Regiment. And maybe not all of them had successful careers there at Ranger Regiment either, but it was a great stepping stone opportunity.
So General Townsend and I, who's the AFRICOM commander, when I was out there, was, probably one of the best 4-stars I've seen, right? He's just very, he knows how to issue guidance like I've never seen, and he's very, very good at here's my intent and what I want, and then there's no questions afterwards, right? And he was just a great commander, and very long. I mean, everybody knows who he is. He kind of had a lot of the, did a lot of things, throughout the Army, and one of the places he kind of started his career as a field grade, in the Ranger Regiment, and I think he was there earlier as a captain. I can't remember, but we had a discussion over my house, so we all kind of lived in this area right there on Kelly Barracks and housing. And one night we were having a discussion at one of the get-togethers, and it was probably being in the Rangers was probably the most formative thing that happened to me as an officer, right? It kind of formed who I was and kind of made me disciplined and standards, and it was probably the one defining thing that kind of after that kind of set me up for the rest of my career. Right. And I think you see that with a lot of the other, people who've come into the Ranger Regiment and then gone on and done other things, and they've been able to cut their teeth in the Rangers and then kind of move on and been successful, having kind of had that standards and discipline, that culture, and working with these people, these extraordinary people from different walks of life, all kind of aimed at this one culture and purpose.
What advice would you give the guys who are non-commissioned officers, whether they're conventional Army or they're special operations, about how to make it further within the Army? I mean, you've had success. A lot of it, you said, was good timing, good people, connections, whatever the case may be. But is there some other secret sauce here?
Again, the timing piece, just kind of putting your head down and grinding away at these jobs. Your career or whatever it is, there's a career path. The Army has kind of told you, do these things to get promoted to the next. So make sure you're doing them. And then at the same time, hey, continuously professional development. I'm a big believer in reading, reading different books and different kind of subjects. Don't just read leadership books, right? I mean, they're great, but read other things like biographies and maybe a little nonfiction, just kind of expand your mind a little bit. Continually professional develop yourself, take some college courses, one of the best things I did to finally finish my bachelor's, right? Just before I went into this MBA program. I wish that I'd been able to do it before, right? So it kind of helps make you be a more critical thinker, right? And just when you kind of read and do it and educate yourself, you become a better thinker, better speaker, better critical thinker, just all those things. That's what I would tell people. Continuously professional develop yourself.
So I think we kind of touched on it before, but what about those individuals that are NCOs and they're trying to figure out whether they should go to Ranger Regiment? Should they?
Why wouldn't you? Now, I mean, it's, if you're an NCO out there, I used to go speak to the RASP 1 class quite a bit, and then when they were going through, and I would walk into the room And one of the first things I would be like is like, hey, who's here from conventional? Like 5, 6 hands raised up. Where are you from? Where are you from? Where are you from? You know, and they would tell you. Generally, 82nd, 101st were kind of like the main ones that you would get hands from. What brigade were you in? You know, this person, that kind of thing. But say, take a chance, right? I mean, it's achievable, right? We all of us who were there got a tan beret and scrolls. Like, we were all able to do it, right? It's not impossible. I used to tell the RASP guys and gals when I used to go down there and talk to them in the middle of classes too, right? I would say, hey, it's going to be hard, right? But you want it to be a little hard. That's why you're here, right? If you didn't want it to be hard, like nobody came here thinking this is probably going to be an easy thing for me to get through. I think I'm going to do the RASP program and become a Ranger. Like nobody's ever really said that.
Said no one ever.
Said no one ever, right? But you want it to be a little hard. So kind of like push yourself and take that leap of faith. And because I would tell you, it will be worth it in the other end. Like there's not a time that I regret what I, you know, kind of some of the sacrifices and everything that I went through and you know, kind of the, you know, long nights of road marching and, you know, and all those deployments and stuff like that. Yeah, it had a toll on my family for sure, right? There's some regret there. But at the same time, like, I was surrounded by great people and a great opportunity. I would tell any of them who's thinking about just do it, right? You're going to make it. Like, you're not the first one who didn't make it. But at least you went out there and gave it a try.
Yeah. The answer is always no unless you ask.
Yeah.
And, I mean, if you don't try, you're never going to get it, right? And it's really just about out there getting after it. Most of the people, like you said, most of the people that make it through any sort of selection, any sort of higher education, taking a chance. I mean, I'm sure everybody's done something hard in their lives. It's just which direction you want to go with it. So
you're older, you're wiser now. Let's go back in time. What are you going to tell your 28-year-old self that just came into Ranger Regiment and passed RIP?
Oh, wow.
Don't get fat.
Yeah. Do better PT.
Do better PT and don't do stupid shit.
Do better in Ranger school. I mean, I think I would tell myself to embrace the Ranger culture a little bit better as a younger Ranger. I don't think I did that as well as I should have, right? And then, you know, reflecting back on that, I didn't take it as seriously as I probably, it took me a little while to really kind of realize what I was a part of, right? And it wasn't for lack of like leadership and nobody could tell, like, it was just kind of me being, I just didn't fully grasp it, right? I would tell myself, hey, really, really understand what you're a part of and embrace it, right? And it took me a little while to do that, but glad I did.
I think that's fair for you, though. I mean, you talk about your background, not having a military background, coming in, saw the Rangers. That's something I want to do. People that have a military background, we know about the different tier levels.
Sure.
They're like, man, you know, embrace it. So you learned it, and look how far you got.
Yeah, I was fortunate. Had a lot of great people pulling and pushing me along, right? I mean, it's, you know, you don't do these things on your own. Like, I had a ton of great people that surrounded me and kind of pushed and pulled me along. I could sit here the rest of the night and list off their names, right? But like, it's, you know, I was very fortunate. Yeah.
So, and now he's one of the names for somebody else.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
People talk about you now.
That's awesome.
So looking at this whole thing, Mike, you've had a successful career all the way to this point. You've done everything you can to make sure you're well-rounded. You're now finishing out your degree. You're going to go get your MBA. What's next for Mike?
Oh, that's the $1 million question right there. I don't, you know, I'm taking some time off and kind of figuring that out. I'm hoping the MBA will kind of help me, you know, figure that out. You know, a couple things, you know, I'm a big data analytics fan. You know, I might do something with that. You know, there's just a ton of opportunities. I would say something in private industry. I want to kind of get away from doing anything with DOD. You know, I kind of did that for 28 some years. Like, I want to do something else in private industry. That's why I'm kind of focused on kind of a business degree, like understanding business, like finance and accounting and marketing and those kind of things that like help a business run. So those kind of things. A little bit, maybe jump in a nonprofit, you know, maybe so help out a nonprofit somewhere, disaster relief. You know, my wife runs a nonprofit here out of Georgia for animals, animal companionship, and does a lot of legislative work. So helping her with that. And then, you know, at the same time, you know, I've thought about, you know, maybe acquiring a small business, right? Entrepreneurship through acquisition, right? Finding a small business that hey, some baby boomer wants to get rid of and sell, and his family doesn't really want it, not what they want to do, and I don't want my legacy to die, and I want to sell this thing off. So doing something like that where I could kind of put my organizational leadership skills, and kind of go into a company and say, okay, I've learned all this stuff about business, and I kind of know how to like run an organization and make it successful, and kind of come in and say, okay, processes and SOPs and that kind of thing, and make it run a little bit better. And I may do that, but we'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Mike, I appreciate you coming all this way, Tampa, spending this time with us here. It's been, an hour and a half, and it's hard to believe that we've been sitting here that long. And I know for you, it's probably surprising, but we just really appreciate you considering us coming here and sharing this knowledge, man. Really do. No,
I appreciate it. It's a great time to, you all put on a great podcast, a great production here. I'm honored to kind of be asked to do something like this, Yeah, it's great. Hopefully, some of the viewers took a couple things out of it. I'm not a huge, big social media person. I don't put myself out there a whole lot. So this is a little out of my comfort zone, but, it's good for a good cause, and anything I can do for the community, I would happily do. Yeah.
Appreciate it, man.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.